buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun, this is for mine, this is for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Oh, I know you are so confused by the fact that the screen says Thursday, the theme music says Friday, and you have no idea what's happening. Well, that's okay, because today we are going at it in a little bit differently. Tomorrow is Friday. Today is actually Thursday. But since we are going to be off the air tomorrow, the show is, not the radio stations. The radio stations will be playing alternate programming. I decided that we needed to have our weekly chat on firearms. And whether you want to call it, somebody said Tactical Thursday. I don't think that. I think it's just, I think it's just Thursday. And we're gonna talk about it. I know people are like, I'm so confused. Is it Friday or is it what? So I will be off the air tomorrow. You'll have alternate programming in across the state, and on Monday as well for the holiday. I will be out, and so just FYI, that's what's happening. We're going to we're going to dive into this. And today we're going to spend a little bit of time going over what has happened in Uvalde, Texas, and the response to it. Some of it, I guess you could say, typical, understandable, and just kind of get some feel. We're gonna get your feelings on it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to give some of my thoughts. As well as to what has happened, what can be done, what can we do to fix it? Because so far what we've seen is a whole lot of posturing and a whole lot of virtue signaling from many of the politicians out there who want to use this as some kind of springboard to further an agenda that really is not going to do anything to stop what's happening already. So we're gonna talk about that. In hour 2 of the program today, we're going to get a chance to chat with my good friend, Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine, who wrote a piece that was produced yesterday that talks specifically about the response and the irrelevancy of that response to the actual effects and things that are actually happening out there. So we're going to talk with Jacob Sullum in hour 2 of the program today. No Willie Waffle this week. I gave Willie the week off when I decided to take that. So we're going to have to wait. We're hoping to hear from him on Top Gun and some other stuff. We're going to hear about that next week, and probably we'll have more. We'll probably have more information, or more stuff to talk about next week as well for the entertainment report and all that. So, that's the show today. Now, let me just start off by saying this, and I talked a little bit about it yesterday when I made the announcement that we were going to be doing the firearm stuff today, and we were going to talk about Uvalde and everything else, and that I said yesterday that I wasn't ready to talk about it because because I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken at the thought of so many innocents, again, dying so tragically in this horrible, horrible situation. And I was appalled by the actions of many to immediately embrace the Rahm Emanuel school of thought of never let a crisis go to waste. And I mean, I was just shocked and blown away. And I was angry. I was angry, obviously, at the perpetrator of this crime. Angry that things had gotten to this level for him and for those around him, that, things had gone unsaid or undone, that we've seen, continual failures in many of these instances of shooting deaths and mass shootings specifically, where warning signs have been ignored and things have just kind of gone off the rails. And then, of course, we want to blame everything else when it's been many times the failure of those that are purportedly in charge of the situation to address it in a timely manner. But most importantly, I really, really got upset with the President of the United States. Now, I know some of you will argue about, well, he's not really my, whatever. But here is the President of the United States standing in front of the American people in a time of absolute tragedy. And he's going to open his mouth and start to talk. And when the speech started, I thought, here's a man who himself has lost 2 children and understands the pain that some of these people are going through. And I thought that he was going to take that opportunity to maybe heal some wounds, to, bring the country together, to do some things like that. And because it looked like, for the first bit, it looked like that was what was going to happen. I thought maybe I was going to be pleasantly surprised. This is President Joe Biden on the eve of that shooting, on the evening after that shooting, making his comments for the first time. And I'm going to play them. And we're going to talk about what happens here. This is the president after the Uvalde shooting, as he came out in front of the reporters with his wife. Here's what he had to say.
Good evening, fellow Americans. I had hoped when I became president I would not have to do this. But again, another massacre. Uvalde, Texas. An elementary school. Beautiful, innocent, second, third, fourth graders. And how many scores of little children who witness what happened, see their friends die as if they're on a battlefield, for God's sake. They'll live with it the rest of their lives. There's a lot we don't know yet. There's a lot we do know. The parents who will never see their child again, never have them jump in bed and cuddle with them. Parents who will never be the same. To lose a child is like having a piece of your soul ripped away. There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it and never going to be able to get out. Suffocating. And it's never quite the same. It's a feeling shared by the siblings and the grandparents and the family members and the community that's left behind. Scripture says, Jill and I have talked about this in different contexts, in other contexts. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. So many crushed spirits. So tonight, I ask the nation to pray for them. Give the parents and siblings the strength in the darkness they feel right now. As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby?
So, I mean, it was touching. I mean, he looks back at his wife. He talks about this feeling. He talks about the tragedy and what they're feeling. He asks, he invokes scriptures, and he asks for the nation to pray. And then there's this just weird transition, just like all of a sudden, to the attack dog mentality. I mean, I had to go back and watch it again because I was like, "What? Did it skip? Did I miss something?"
So tonight, I ask the nation to pray for them, give the parents and siblings the strength in the darkness they feel right now.
Boom.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby?
The speech is about 9 minutes in total. And for 2 minutes and 2 seconds, he talks about the people and unity and coming together and the feeling and, offering great sorrow. I mean, the things that should be done by a leader during this time. And then he spends the next 7 minutes plus talking about gun control and how what we need to do and how we need to do it. And why we're also, he's got some words in here, and I'm going to play the rest of this. Not the whole 7 minutes of it, but I'm going to play a little bit more of this, because this is where he again takes the Saul Alinsky, Rahm Emanuel, don't let a crisis go to waste position, and uses it in the heart of this tragedy. The heart of this tragedy. And uses it to leverage an agenda that would have had no effect on this shooting. No effect at all. Here's where he takes off.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? It's been 3,448 days, 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents of gunfires reported on school grounds.
Now, of those 900 incidents, gunfire incidents on school grounds, you're led to believe that children have been attacked by a gunman 900 times. I can tell you through analysis and discussions that I've had with people like Dr. John Lott and others that the vast majority of those are instances where guns were fired on school grounds, usually not while school was in session, gang violence, suicides that take place on school grounds. Somebody after school wanders onto a school playground and shoots themselves, those kind. But see, you're led to believe that all those things, this is it. That's what he's talking about. But you're led to believe that there's been 900 incidences of children being held at gunpoint, when that's not necessarily the case. But it just furthers his cause. We'll go on.
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Santa Fe High School in Texas. Oxford High School in Michigan. The list goes on, and the list grows when it includes mass shootings at places like movie theaters, houses of worship, as we saw just 10 days ago, the grocery store in Buffalo, New York.
All of these places, I will point out, are what we would call soft targets. That's what military law enforcement would call soft targets. there is no ability for people to defend themselves. They are all literally gun-free zones.
I am sick and tired of it. We have to act. And don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage. I spent my career as a senator and a vice president working to pass common sense gun laws. We can and won't prevent every tragedy, but we know they work and have positive impact. When we passed the assault weapons ban, mass shootings went down. When the law expired, mass shootings tripled.
Again, this has no basis in fact. Over and over again, they have tried to assess the efficacy of the assault weapons bans, and they found that it had no meaningful impact on gun violence, murder, or crime. Because again, assault weapons are used in such a minute fraction of the overall crimes in America, it has no meaningful impact. But again, the president said it must be damn the facts.
The idea that an 18-year-old kid can walk into a gun store and buy 2 assault weapons is just wrong.
First of all, he's an 18-year-old, which makes him an adult. It is the law that he could, as an adult, do that. Now, it's also, a kid can buy a car when he's 16 and run a bunch of people over. You don't say that's unreasonable, that people should be able to buy cars at 16.
The idea that an 18-year-old kid can walk into a gun store and buy 2 assault weapons is just wrong. What in God's name do you need an assault weapon for except to kill someone? Deer aren't running through the forest with Kevlar vests on, for God's sake. It's just sick.
It's just sick. Why do you need an assault rifle?
It's just sick.
That's how they perceive us, my friends. That's how they perceive us, as sick. Because they just can't imagine what that's all about. We're going to continue this discussion because he had more to say the following day. And I'm going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to talk about how could this be stopped? How can we fix this? Because all the things he just talked about, none of those things are going to fix this problem. The Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio. All right. Oh, I'm so heated about this. So heated. I mean, first and foremost, I'm willing to have a reasonable discussion on gun control, but in the middle of this tragedy, I mean, it was almost a bait and switch, wasn't it? I mean, it was almost a bait and switch of this soft tone of understanding and calling for unity and bringing people together and let's pray, and then it's the jump. What do we got? We're gonna stand up to the gun. I mean, it was just this, like somebody flicked a switch. It's insane. Absolutely insane. All right. So we're going to talk about this. Let me go back into the chat room here to see some of the things that you guys have to say this morning. Scrolling backwards. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Children are assets and should be treated as such. 40B would put, I don't know what 40B is, would put airport level security in every school. But here we are not protecting our assets. I don't know as I necessarily think that the answer is to, turn every school into a TSA checkpoint. There are probably some pieces of that we can use, but I've got some hesitancy on some of those things as well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. This is a result of the crap society we live in and the quest of worthless paper we call money. I don't know how the quest for money, I mean, we've all got to live. I don't know if that's part of it. I would say there's definitely some societal aspects of it. It's not about the gun lobby, says Jeannie. Absolutely. Never let a crisis go to waste, says Greg. True. How about we follow and enforce existing laws, says Greg. I mean, I'm all about that. I mean, we know, for example, we can point to a handful of these mass shootings just right off the top of my head where law enforcement and the law, if it had been followed, would have stopped some of these things. The Parkland shooter had over 24 interactions with local law enforcement, and I think it was over 12 with federal law enforcement. The same thing with the Pulse nightclub shooter. He had interactions. The Sutherland Springs shooter was dishonorably discharged, which was never reported to, would have made him an ineligible person under the NICS background check system, and it was never reported by the Air Force. The government and its agents have continued to fall down. And yet the answer is not what we do. It's not what they do or what they fail to do. It, of course, is our problem. That, again, 99% plus of all crimes and violent crimes and gun crimes have nothing to do with assault weapons or any of these other things. Deflection, says Jeannie. Brian says there's a list of those school shootings, quote unquote, floating around on the internet. I'd love to see it, Brian. If you find it, shoot it over to me. But I can tell you of the, whatever he said, 900 instances, I guarantee you the better part of them have nothing to do with the picture he's trying to paint. Greg is right. We need to enforce existing laws. We also need much better linkage between mental health services and law enforcement. We need to harden the schools so idiots just can't walk in and do terrible acts. I mean, I think, again, we're going to get into that, and I agree with a lot of that. Supreme Court, one of the leading reasons the Supreme Court ruling in June of 2015 is one of the leading reasons I needed an assault rifle. Yeah, considering TSA's track record, we don't want to model every school after a TSA checkpoint. Oh, the $40 billion in money we gave to Ukraine. Thank you. All right. We're going to jump back into this here. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free, thick, and radio. We got a phone call on hold. We're going to talk to them as well. Let's continue. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing. We're opening up the phone lines for Q&A today. Gun discussions, firearms, talking about this topic and more. 907-433-3150, the Pivotel call-in line, powered by our friends at Satellite West. I want to continue on with what the president was talking about because the next night he comes back and doubles down on stupid. But before we do that and before we have to jump into that, let's go to the phones. We got a call on hold here, and I want to see what you, the callers, have to say today. Let's go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, it's Brady from Vegas.
Hey, Brady, what's on your mind?
How come all of these shooters all have an AR-15, which ends up to be number 6, which is satanic? This is the satanic government. This is another false flag.
Wait a
How
second.
come there was no injuries in front of the school?
Wait a second.
Every one of the injuries, they all died.
Wait a second, Brady. I'm trying. Brady, wait.
Dead.
Brady, wait. I'm trying to figure out what you said. What the 6? What? How does 6 figure into any of what you're talking about right now?
AR-15. You add numbers together. 1 and 5 equals 6.
Okay.
It's part of the game.
You're into numerology now.
One thing.
You're into numerology now. Is that it? I mean, you're trying to pull all this together. I mean,
not into numerology, but show me the bodies, show me the blood, just like that shooting that was in Buffalo, completely fake.
Oh, okay. Man, I'm sorry, Brady. I just can't with you right now today. I just can't. Show you the bodies, show you the things. I mean, people have died. If you think this is some kind of big cover-up or some kind of big theatrical production, first of all, I think you give the government too much credit, or whoever it is too much credit, because that would be, it's just, stop. Just stop, my friend. Okay? Just stop. I just can't with people like that when we've seen the tragedy. I mean, what would prove it to you? What would prove it to you? News crews going through and showing pictures of the bodies? I'm sure you'd claim that was fake too. You know, I mean, do you believe in the moon landing? Do you think that was faked? I mean, are we living on are you a flat earther? I'm just asking. Yeah, like Alex Jones is in the Sandy Hook. There's the dumbest thing I've ever, I understand history. I understand false flags. I understand the Reichstag fire. I understand a lot of those things. But there are certain amounts of, the certain scopes of things that I think that trying to ascribe some kind of big, I just can't today. I just can't. So the president, again, I just pointed out a few things that he basically out and out blatantly lies about. And he's done this in the past. He's done this in the past, again, going on about the assault weapons ban did so much. And yet when we look at it, we see it time and time again that it didn't. I mean, research is inconclusive. In fact, Reason just recently did an article about, I don't know if you've seen this article. We talked about it a while ago, and it was a specific deep analysis by the Rand Corporation on the efficacy of a lot of these gun control measures, and they took a look at the assault weapons ban and found that there was no meaningful change. It had no meaningful impact. I posted the link up to that if you want to go take a look at it. But President Biden comes back the next night. He comes back the next night and says, well, I've got more to say, apparently. And he starts again. Again, I personally felt like this was just too soon. But he continues to go on again, and this time he's in front of a different audience, and he starts up again with the fictions all over again.
Well, they clearly will not prevent every tragedy.
He's talking about gun laws, by the way.
Well, they clearly will not prevent every tragedy. We know certain ones will have significant impact and have no negative impact on the Second Amendment.
Okay, so which ones are you proposing would have a significant impact, would make a difference and have no significant impact on the Second Amendment? Name me one. This shooter was 18 years old. He went to a gun shop. He bought 2 brand new guns from an FFL. He passed the NICS background check. What law that you're proposing would have made that difference? Now, the argument would be, well, it's an assault weapon. If you hadn't bought assault weapons, 77% of mass shootings are committed with a handgun. 77% with a handgun. Leaving the other 23% to be split between rifles, shotguns, AR-style rifles. So name me how, outlawing the assault rifle would have made a difference at that point. Because this guy had decided he was going to make a statement. He continues.
Significant impact and have no negative impact on the Second Amendment. Second Amendment's not absolute.
Let that sink in for just a moment.
Second Amendment's not absolute.
The Second Amendment is not absolute. Now let's play a little game that I like to call the substitution game. Almost said the Constitution game. That's a Freudian slip. It's the substitution game.
Second Amendment's not absolute.
How about the First Amendment's not absolute? How about the Fourth Amendment is not absolute? How about the Fifth Amendment is not absolute? You can be compelled. They can put people in your home. They can invade your privacy. They can restrict your speech. They can tell you what to say. They can regulate it. They can permit. You have to submit it in writing and have a 3-day waiting period before anything that you write can be printed or published or posted online. The First Amendment is not absolute. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard from somebody who supposedly has been one of our leaders for, the guy, has he ever really held a job in the private sector? No? Okay, never mind then. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's pretty absolute.
Second Amendment's not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons.
Again, 100% pure fiction. You could own a cannon. You could own any. There were privateers. There were private merchantman sailing ships that were out there doing the work of America under the aegis of Congress. They had cannons. All private ships could have cannons. Private people and individuals could own machine guns. Teddy Roosevelt was gifted for that charge up San Juan Hill, was gifted 2 machine guns by socialites in New York. 4 families in New York got together and they purchased machine guns because they didn't have the funding to do it. So private citizens purchased machine guns and gifted them to the Rough Riders for the fight in the Spanish-American War. It's a lie. And it's one that is so easily debunked. I'm just shocked. He's repeated this one 3 or 4 times already. It is a lie. There was just some guns they just couldn't own.
You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons.
No, that's not what it says. Shall not be infringed. You are lying, and not even good lies, not even couched in some kind of weird statistic or some off-brand study or something. You're just basically saying you couldn't own cannons. It's a direct lie. Irrefutable proof. You couldn't own, machine. It's a lie.
It's just always been limitations.
No, there hasn't. Not until 1934 were there limitations on firearms ownership in the United States. We went 135 years before there was limitations of any kind. Now, individual cities, some states, but no federal regulations on firearms until 1934.
But guess what? These actions we've taken before, they saved lives. And they can do it again. The idea that an 18-year-old can walk into a store.
Here we go again.
And buy weapons of war designed and marketed to kill.
Designed and marketed to kill. Yeah, I've been really watching all those big billboards and movies and television commercials and YouTube commercials for come get your killing machine over here at at Smith & Wesson or at Ruger or at whatever. I've seen all that.
Is I think just wrong. It just violates common sense. Even the manufacturer, the inventor of that weapon, thought that as well.
So he's talking about Eugene Stoner, who never said that. His family had a interview with NBC News back in 2015 or maybe 2017, 2016, 2017, and they thought that their father, they didn't know because he never owned one. He passed away in 1997. He never owned one. He never had one. But they're just not sure that he would be okay with all of America owning an AR. But he never said that.
You know, where's the backbone? Where's the courage to stand up to a very powerful lobby?
The lobby is 100 million Americans who are armed. That's your lobby. The people who own firearms, that's the lobby. You keep talking about the NRA or the gun manufacturers or whatever. No, this is the will of the people. You idiot. The guy's a freaking Muppet. And okay. We're going to go to break. We're going to be back and take some phone calls. And then I do want to talk about, what I think can be done to fix it. I don't think stationing cops in every school is an answer, but there are some other things. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Man, I just almost lost my stuff there. All right. Oh wow, 3 lines on hold. All right, let me go over to the phones and see who's on the lines. We'll get them all queued up here for the return to radio. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Layla from Fairbanks.
All right, Layla, hold the line, my friend. You will be first in the queue. Long time no hear, by the way. Good to let me actually so that I know where everybody's coming from. All right, let's go over to the next caller. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Mike. This is Jason calling from. Heard Bloom say something last night that shocked me because I thought he was at least an honest man, but apparently not.
Okay, let me put you on hold and we can talk about that. Don't go anywhere, Jason. Third in the queue here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Charles in Fairbanks. Senator Hayakawa taught me a lot about public speaking, and this book was in my speech class in 1987.
Right.
And to tell the truth, you need to, public speaking, you have to tell the truth or else nobody will believe you.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% true, Charles.
Huh?
I think you have to tell the truth. Absolutely. Your credibility is shot. I mean, his
Start with Obama.
Yeah, I mean, his credibility is shot to begin with. You want to hold on here and we'll be back to you here in a bit?
Yeah.
All right, so hold on. We'll be back to you here. You're third in the queue. 3 in the tree. That's what it is. 3 in the phone tree. All right, let me go back here to the comments and see what you guys have to say. Sorry, I'm backing up here. Okay. No meaningful impact. This is the point that I keep hammering on, says Floyd. No meaningful impact, meaning there's going to be some impact. And first of all, it's going to be meaningful. I mean, saying that the Second Amendment is not absolute blatantly flies in the face of everything that the founders and framers talked about. It is a restriction on government. That's what the Bill of Rights is. That's what the Constitution is. It is restrictive on government. prescriptive to us, restrictive on government. How come school shootings didn't happen before 1966 with Charles Whitman in Texas? History is full of sick puppies. The early 1900s, people could mail order firearms like Tommy guns. Nobody went to schools and shoot up schools. Only organized crimes abused them. They used sawed-off shotguns by gangsters. No one thought to shoot up schools. What changed when era of unrestricted firearms acquisition of 90 years ago to today's regulated firearms and school shootings? There's a huge question in that. Now, actually, the shooting at the Bath, what was it called, the Bath Schoolhouse? That's actually really the first school shooting. And shooting, he used dynamite. He had a rifle. He had a lever-action rifle. But he actually blew up the schoolhouse with dynamite. So, I mean, that's the first one if you really want to get technical about it. But you're right. You know, that's this thing. Oh, Bath. I was right. Bath schools. Jeannie just confirmed it's Bath Schoolhouse. Why does no one talk about the mental health issues in this country? It's easier to sweep them under the rug. It's easier to medicate. It's easier to ignore and override. Biden doesn't think our Constitution is absolute. And that's exactly it. That just shows out of the mouth speaks the heart. He doesn't think the Constitution is absolute. He thinks the government should have the ultimate say in everything that's going on. Let's see. Personally, I still can't get over the fact. Okay. It's like the freaking Twilight Zone. It's been the law in Texas for over 40 years, says Dwayne. I don't know which law you're referring to, Dwayne, but whatever it is, 40 days. Back in the days before World War I, the National Guard did not exist. The 1870s Home Guard units existed. Communities in the Midwest and equipped and outfitted citizens with equipment. That's what the true militia is. They keep trying to say the National Guard is the militia. That's not true. The militia is defined as the people, the whole people. Yet you expect the same 18-year-old to shoulder a pack, pick up a rifle, and go to war. This is Brian talking about when the president said, I can't believe an 18-year-old could go in and buy a gun. I bought my first gun at 18. I mean, I would think I was a week beyond 18. I bought my first handgun because you could do that here in the state of Alaska. I already owned other guns, but that was the first time I had purchased one for myself. The first school shooting, yeah, okay, say, no love of country or morals, a life prescribed by the left. The feds couldn't control our state militia, so they created a National Guard. That's 100% true as well. When they invaded Mexico and wanted the states to send their militias as backup to the militaries, the states said, no, we defend our states, we don't invade countries. All right. Buying a firearm at 18 in Texas was the law he was referring to. Thank you. All right, folks, do me a favor, like and share this video. If you haven't gone out and subscribed to my YouTube page, would you do that as well today? I need 1,000 subscribers, and I'm at like 200. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. All right. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for coming in and joining us. We appreciate it. The Michael Duke Show continues. It's Thursday, but we're treating it like Friday because I'm going to be off tomorrow. And so we're talking about firearms. We've been talking about the events in Uvalde. And the president's reaction and other politicians' reactions, including Beto O'Rourke's reaction to this. And he didn't just have a speech. Beto O'Rourke actually crashed the briefing in Uvalde. The mayor was giving a briefing on what was happening. The governor was on the podium, the sheriff, and everything else was out there. He decides to walk out in front of the crowd and stand out there and start to accuse Governor Abbott of doing nothing, turning it into a political grandstanding moment. And the sheriff of Uvalde was having nothing to do with it.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Sit down.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Hey, sit down and don't play this stuff.
Shooting is right now, and you're doing nothing.
No, he needs to get his ass out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
I mean, this is the kind of piece of human excrement that Beto O'Rourke is. But, I mean, again, this is the politicians. This is what they're doing. Layla's in Fairbanks. She wanted to sound off this morning. Let's see what she has to say. Good morning, Layla. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Michael. And I do listen every morning. I just don't call in.
Okay. Well, good. It's good to hear from you.
Look, I used to work in community behavioral health. And one of the issues that we had was that the vast majority of social workers believe that it's fine for people who are chronically mentally ill to go off their medication from time to time. And there's also questions about the medications and what they do, especially in younger brains. But this thing about them being able to just go off their medications whenever they want, it's no big deal. Well, it is. You were living here when the guy at the mental health center stabbed one of my coworkers.
Right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a case of, we're just going to let him try medication holiday. Yeah.
Yeah. How's that working out, right?
And that's not uncommon. That's not just here in Fairbanks. That's the entire mental health field. They believe that it's okay. Then you've got the psychiatrists, particularly working with young people, who believe that we're just going to experiment with these drugs. And we're going to, see if we can fix these kids, Well, we do know that particularly when it comes to antidepressants, that long-term use causes an imbalance in neurochemicals.
Right.
And so those imbalances, we don't know what those lead to yet.
Right.
But I think we do.
Well, yeah,
I think we do.
Well,
and that's the thing. And then, of course, these kids have had contact with the cops before, and they just go, oh, they're just blowing off steam. The one kid had pled, anxiety after a cop, after he was questioned, after he threatened people. The cops questioned him, and he said, well, I was feeling anxious, so I said that so I could get out of class.
Right.
And they let him go.
Well, again, the Parkland shooter, 20-plus interactions with local law enforcement, a dozen interactions with federal officers. I mean, it's happened again and again and again. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and we can't medicate it away. We've got to find a way to fix it.
Right, and the major thing to understand is that it is against the law for somebody who has been diagnosed with a chronic mental illness to purchase a gun. So how is it that these guys are getting past the background checks? Background checks don't work.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, there's the criminal issue, which criminals don't buy guns from gun shops because they know they'll get denied when they go in. And so they have their own sources, people who are willing to sell to them.
Again, over 80%, over 83% of the firearms used in these mass shootings were purchased legally. That just shows you right there that this is, I mean, that the problem is definitely more than what they're trying to make it out to be. Let's just put it that way.
What they're trying to do is not working, but they keep trying to do it more.
Yeah.
As if somehow just doing it harder will fix it. And it doesn't.
Layla, I appreciate it, honey. I got to go here. I got other calls. Thank you for calling in this morning. I appreciate your perspective as a mental health care professional. Let's go over here. Jason is in Fairbanks as well. Jason?
Hello, Michael. Yes, good morning. Yeah, before I got to what I heard last night, I just want to say Layla is right. I have a niece who is medicated since she was a toddler, and it seemed to have erased the part of her mind and soul that controls morality, and she's been in and out of prison. She hasn't killed anyone yet, and I emphasize yet. So no, Layla's right. But what I heard last night, which I thought would interest you, you know who Howard Bloom is. He's a he's a leftist fellow, but he's always put himself forward as being data driven. That even if something goes against his personal worldview, he has to accept it as being factual. Well, last night I heard him on with George Norrie. He's a regular, short time guest on there sometimes, and they were talking about this incident, of course. And Howard Bloom made a comment which it stunned me, as I thought he was at least an honest man. He said, when we had the assault weapons ban, the number of crimes committed with automatic weapons, that is machine guns, went down by 70%. Well, as far as I'm aware, I can't think of any crimes during that time or after that were committed using machine guns at all. And of course, as you mentioned, that Rand study showed that the assault weapons ban had minimal impact of any kind.
Right, no appreciable
so in other words,
impact.
We have prominent people who are lying who need to be. We need to correct them.
Absolutely. And in fact, the crimes committed with machine guns are so low, they're almost imperceptible on the UCMJ reports of that kind of thing. I mean, it almost never happens, especially legal machine guns. But this is another part of that attempt to conflate semi-automatic rifles with machine guns. Or assault rifles with just semi-automatic guns to begin with. That's a whole nother thing. You're 100% right, Jason. That's the goal. The goal here is...
Where it's just Grandpa's old semi-automatic hunting rifle.
Exactly.
It just looks scary, but it doesn't fire any bigger rounds or at any higher rate. It just looks like a military weapon, therefore it's quote-unquote scary and therefore quote-unquote more dangerous.
Or Grandpa's 75-year-old Colt 1911. Same thing. It's the same semi-automatic gun that they want to ban. The same ones that we carried in World War II, the Garand, the M1, or the 1911. It's 100% true. You're 100% true. Those are the lies that they're using. This conflation of automatic weapons with semi-automatic and black rifles as automatics and just the whole thing. It's insane. All right, I got one more line. Charles, I'm going to talk to you here in a second, but we've got Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine coming up next. It is the Michael Dukes Show. Your home for Common Sense Radio. All right. Sorry about that. I ran out of time, but Charles is still on the line. Charles, I'm sorry couldn't get to you on the air. What was on your mind about the speech class that you were talking about?
Senator S.A. Hayakawa, a Japanese man, wrote a book called Language in Thought and Action. And that is a standard people should be required to read before they qualify a public speaker as being worthy of having a public position at all, let alone saying anything.
Right.
You got to read that book, man. Look it up, Senator Hayakawa, Japanese man.
Right. Well,
awesome book, man. Use concrete language only. Right. Nothing ambiguous. Well, nothing ambiguous.
I guess.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Charles. I mean, we don't. I guess we don't have to certify our public speakers when they're, I guess, the president of the United States. That gives them some kind of. But again, utilizing that platform to continuously lie over and over and over again makes no sense whatsoever. All right. Let me get Jacob Sullum on the line here before I get too far along, and otherwise I'll get distracted, and ain't nobody got time for that. So let me get Jacob Sullum on the line, and we'll get started here, and then I have one more phone call on hold here. We might take this other call here real quick, but first let me get Jacob Sullum squared away here. All right, there we go. Nope, apparently I didn't dial properly. So let me do this one more time. Sorry, folks. This is what happens when you don't have an engineer or a producer to help you with what you're doing here on the air. Please check us out on Facebook, or check us out on YouTube, rather. Subscribe. I'm looking for 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel to get to the next level. Let's see if we can get this squared away.
Hello, this is Jacob Sullum at Reason Magazine.
Uh-oh. Jacob is not ready to he's not ready to take my call. Let me try that again here. We'll try it again here in a second. Let's take this other call real quick and see what you have to say, and maybe by the time we're done with this call, I can get to Jacob. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Carlene, Michael, be careful of your clips that you edit out swear words so that you don't get a fine.
Oh no, that's directly broadcast. That was a cut from a direct broadcast over television. I'm not too worried about it. So
press 3.
So
okay,
I think we'll be good.
Bye.
But thank you so much, Carlene. I appreciate it. She was talking about him saying "son of a bitch," which, I mean, that's pretty mild these days, right? Let me try this again here. We'll try and get Jacob on the phone one more. I know this is great. This is great Facebook or radio or whatever we're doing here, but this is why I normally have guests call in to me instead of the other way around. All right, we'll try one more time here for Jacob Sullum. Good morning, Mr. Sullum, my friend. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. Sorry about that. I was trying to talk and type and dial and talk to you all at the same time. It was a hot mess.
Multitasking.
Yes, I know, and I suck at it, so it's all good. Thanks for coming on board this morning. I appreciate it. I know it was late notice, but I caught your article late yesterday afternoon, and I'm taking – normally I reserve everything for Friday for firearm stuff, but since I'm taking tomorrow off, I decided this would be timely to get it in. And okay. I appreciate you coming in and joining us. It's just you and me and 50-something of our closest friends on Facebook and plus whatever's on YouTube and Twitch right now. So we're hanging out here. We're about 2 minutes out from rejoining the radio. So if you hold on just a quick second, I'll be right back to you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Jacob Sullum, senior editor from Reason Magazine, our guest on the program this morning. We're going to rejoin with him here as soon as we're going to start with him as soon as we rejoin the radio here. Please don't mistake an assault rifle with a made-up term assault weapon. The whole thing is it's ridiculous anyway. It's a misnomer. I mean, if I beat you to death with a chair leg, is it an assault chair leg, or is it just a chair leg that I used to assault you? A hammer. More people were kicked and bludgeoned to death with hands, fists, and feet than were killed by assault rifles. Almost every year, year after year after year, usually by orders of magnitude. So are those assault hands, assault fists, assault feet? It's another way to yoke up the language and try and evoke something out of nothing, essentially. Sorry, I'm going through here. Arrest Beto O'Rourke. Yeah, I mean, again, you thought the president's trampoline leap of using a tragedy for political gain was bad. And then you watch Beto O'Rourke and you realize that Biden is a piker. I mean, he's an amateur compared to what O'Rourke did, walking in on that press conference. That's just insane. And I can't remember, Jacob, are you in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm in Dallas.
What is your thoughts on that walk in with O'Rourke on the big press conference where they were reporting on that?
Oh, I mean, the whole premise here is that Republicans don't care about dead children, and we know that because they refuse to implement the policies that we favor.
Right.
So there's never any consideration that they might honestly disagree with you about what policies are appropriate or make sense.
Exactly.
And you see this not just in, grandstanding politicians, like Beto O'Rourke, but also and not just in opinion pieces, but in the news coverage, in mainstream news coverage.
Well, hell, all I have to do is fire up my Twitter feed to see that. Yeah, it's exact. Hold the line here. We're going to be right back to you, Jacob. Maybe we'll start with that, okay? We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the interwebs at MichaelDukesShow.com, where you'll find links to everything that we're doing out there, including the simulcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, the podcasts and more, and also, of course, broadcasting across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator. Thursday, I know it's a little confusing, but we're actually doing Friday stuff on Thursday because I'm going to be off tomorrow for the long weekend. And so today we're focusing on firearms and gun issues and gun rights. And, of course, the big discussion all morning this morning has been the events in Uvalde and the political, just Machiavellian political BS that's been going on over this kind of stuff. Somebody who I follow quite closely is Jacob Sullum. He is a senior editor and writer for Reason Magazine, and he wrote a piece late yesterday talking about the response to the Uvalde massacre and how politicians basically are reiterating their demands for gun control laws and how irrelevant that actually is, that expanded checks and all these things that they talk about have no meaningful impact on this. Jacob Sullum is our guest right now on the program. Good morning, my friend. Thank you for coming in.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So behind-the-scenes baseball, I actually texted Jacob last night. I think it was probably 8 o'clock his time, and he was kind enough to respond and come on, and I really appreciate that. So we were just talking before the break, before we came back, about, because we went out of the last segment of the show playing Beto O'Rourke's impingement on this press conference that they were holding for the citizens and for the people and for the press on what was unfolding in Uvalde. And he took that moment to be a political jackwagon and stood up there and started accusing Governor Abbott of not doing anything. He was eventually removed by security, but not until the sheriff, in a very Texas way, basically told him that he was a dirty SOB for, basically invading these families and this tragedy. And since you are in Texas, I thought I'd get your hot take on it.
Yeah, I think that O'Rourke is, it's a particularly obnoxious variety of this kind of self-righteous grandstanding, but it's a much broader phenomenon among Democratic politicians, but also mainstream news reporters, where the assumption is that if you don't support the policies that we want to see, then you don't care when children are murdered. Right. That's the not just the implication. It is what O'Rourke said in so many words. Right. So what's wrong with that is that it means you're not having a rational discussion about the specific policies that they're recommending and whether they make sense, whether they would be effective. And I'll just give you a couple of examples, which we can get into a little bit more, maybe.
Right.
One thing that has come up repeatedly in coverage in the New York Times is, Texas has loose gun laws, and they repeatedly cite the fact that they recently eliminated the permitting requirement for concealed carry of handguns. What that has to do with mass shootings, this particular one, or any mass shooting, is really hard to comprehend. How is that relevant? It's not.
Right.
Had they not passed that law, this wouldn't have happened. It makes no sense.
Right.
It's totally illogical. And another example that you hear this again and again, is that, and in fact, it looked like the Senate was going to have a vote on expanding background checks so that they cover not just sales by federally licensed dealers, but also private transfers. And you say, okay, that's a response to this incident or to mass shootings in general. How? This particular perpetrator bought his guns from a federally licensed dealer. He underwent a background check, and he passed the background check. That is typically true of mass shooters. They don't have disqualifying criminal or psychiatric records, so they are legally allowed to buy firearms. So expanding the background check clearly would not have affected the shooter in this case, would not have affected the shooter in Buffalo, would not have affected the shooter at Sandy Hook who got the gun from his mother. If you drill down into the details of these cases, as the National Institute of Justice did in a recent report, you find that I believe it was 13% of mass shooters, and these are cases from the 60s through I think 2019, 13% of them got weapons through illegal transactions.
Right.
So it's just that 13% where you could even theoretically have an impact by changing background check requirements.
Right.
The rest of them, it couldn't even in theory work, right? So what about that 13%? Well, they got them through, private transfers. If Congress all of a sudden said, when you transfer a gun, you have to go through a federally licensed dealer and you have to conduct a background check, is everybody going to follow that rule? In all likelihood, very few people are going to follow that rule. That's been the experience with state laws that supposedly require universal background checks. They're not universal.
Right. We just saw this in Washington, right? I mean, Washington State passed this thing, and they're saying that the compliance rate is in almost the single digits.
Right. What the researchers do is they look at what happens after these laws are passed, and then you would expect to see a spike in background checks, assuming that people just didn't just stop selling guns altogether. You would see an increase in background checks, and generally they do not see either they see no increase at all or they see only a small increase. And what that tells you is that people who own some guns and they want to sell one or two of them, they generally don't want to take the trouble and expense of going through a licensed dealer to conduct a background check, and they don't. So even if Congress passed that law, you still are not going to have much of an effect on even the people who have disqualifying records, because in all likelihood, they won't have much trouble finding someone who's willing to do a private transfer without the background check.
Right, exactly. And Chuck Schumer, first, he came out swinging right after the incident and immediately said that he is in favor of immediate vote on legislation, but he started to backpedal on that.
Yes, it was interesting. I mean, the only point of such a vote, of course, it's not going to pass. So the only point of that is to show Democrats are good, Republicans are evil. We care about dead children. They don't, in the run up to the elections. And it is, it may be politically smart, I should say, because the background check law, for example, is highly popular, judging from polls. Overwhelming majority of Americans, including gun owners, support that policy. That doesn't make it a good idea, right? The fact that the vast majority of Americans approve of that does not mean it would work. What you're doing in effect is you're incommoding the people who are really careful to obey all relevant law. You're incommoding them. You're imposing extra costs and inconvenience on them. Most people are not going to follow the rule anyway. And the question is, what payoff do you get for that? I mean, that's the question that people should be asking. What's the payoff? So you can look just at mass shootings, which is a tiny percentage of total gun homicides, or you can look at gun homicides in general. And there was a study that looked at that in California after they expanded their background check requirements, so that notionally anybody who's transferring a gun has to go through a dealer, has to conduct a background check. And they found that in the 10 years after that law was passed, there was no noticeable effect on the homicide rate, gun homicide rate specifically.
Right.
So it doesn't look like this is doing it. And it doesn't look, you wouldn't think in advance, just seeing how it's worked elsewhere, that this would have much of an effect. And in practice, it apparently does not.
Right. Well, we see the same thing. Again, the president twice now has gotten up and spoken about the Uvalde incident, and twice he has peppered his speech with, outright falsehoods and fabrications. This whole idea is we passed the assault weapons ban and mass shootings went down, and when it expired, they tripled. But yet the Rand Corporation and others have tried to quantify what has happened, and they said there was no appreciable difference with the assault weapons ban. There was nothing that they could find to say it just nothing. Nothing happened.
Right.
And yet they continue to parrot these things, they tripled. And then the idea of, that you couldn't buy a cannon, back when they passed the Second Amendment. You couldn't, there was always restrictions. There were no, it's demonstrably false on its face. I could point to a dozen different instances where that's an outright fabrication and a lie, but they continue to say it.
Right, and they just assume that people won't delve into the details of these policies. With these assault weapon bans in particular, read the bill, It's the least you can do. Read the bill that you think Congress should pass and see what it actually does.
Right.
What do they mean by assault weapons? So in the case of rifles, it's a semi-automatic rifle that accepts a detachable magazine that has one of these specified characteristics. And they include things like pistol grips, an adjustable or foldable or removable stock, threaded barrel shroud. So if you don't have any of those features, you still have a gun that shoots the same ammunition at the same rate, with the same muzzle velocity, just as lethal as it was with the features. But that's legal.
Right.
That would be legal under the federal ban. It's legal in states like New York and California, where they sell what they call featureless rifles that are compliant with the bans. And then when manufacturers offer or dealers offer those guns in states like New York and California, the people who support the ban say that you're just evading the ban. You're not following the spirit of the law, but they're actually complying with the law because This is what they said. They said these specific features are prohibited. So if you sell a gun that is otherwise identical, but it lacks those features, it's not an assault weapon. It's not covered by the ban. It's perfectly legal. So the problem is not that you have these sneaky, business entrepreneurs who are selling modifications that make your gun compliant. Like you switch out the stock, for example. You use a different kind of grip that doesn't protrude below the action of the weapon. That's legal. The problem is not that there are people who respond to the law by offering compliant weapons. The problem is that there is really no logic to the distinctions the laws are drawing.
Right. Those cosmetic differences whether or not you have a bayonet lug on your rifle makes it no more or less effective as a kinetic weapon. There's not been a whole lot of drive-by bayonettings going on, but that
was in the original federal ban that expired in 2004, the bayonet mount. They removed it because it was subject to so much mockery, and it was so patently absurd. But it still has threaded barrels, for example. If the barrel's threaded or whether it's threaded or smooth, that's crucial somehow, and it makes no sense. So. I always ask people when they say it's obvious that people should not be allowed to buy these weapons of war. What do you think are the specific characteristics that turn something into an assault weapon?
Right.
And people generally don't know. But it's not. Look, the bill is not that well. It's long because they have a huge appendix with all of these specifically exempted weapons.
Right.
But the main text of the bill is not very long at all. It's pretty straightforward. Just read what it says, and that's what they're trying to ban. And that's without even getting to the issue of pre-existing or previously owned guns.
Grandfather.
Are grandfathered.
Yeah,
they're going to have to be grandfathered because there were, I think back in 2016 the estimate was there were about 16 million rifles that would qualify as assault weapons under these laws. It's got to be larger now. Maybe it's closer to 20 million now. So that's going to be grandfathered. So you're going to have all of those available in any case. And even if you didn't, even if you could make all of them disappear somehow, you're still not. The legislation still is not targeting functionally important characteristics.
Right.
So there's no, just a priori, before you even investigate it, there is no logical reason why you would expect it to have any noticeable impact. And as you point out, the research that's looked at it has found that it does not seem to have had any significant impact.
We're talking with Jacob Sullum, senior editor from Reason Magazine. We're talking about gun laws that are being proposed or thrown around as some kind of panacea that's going to fix all of our problems. We know that that's not necessarily true. We're going to dive down deeper into that and then talk about this conflation issue, the conflation of assault rifles, assault weapons, black rifles, whatever, with semi-automatics, and as we talked about earlier, automatic weapons. And we're going to talk about that here with Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend.
Michael Dukes Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine, our guest on this stuff. Jacob, since you're there in Texas, I mean, what's the reaction been? And you're in Dallas, which is not the hotbed of blue thought that Austin is, but it's still a major metroplex. What's the overall take that you're getting in your community?
Well, honestly, I have not talked to a lot of people about it, but
okay.
but my impression. Well, I mean, lately the new information that's emerging makes it look like there was a real police failure in this particular case. You can't assume that that's the explanation in every case, but here the cops delayed going into the school for 40 minutes to an hour, and that's when the perpetrator was killing these children.
Right.
So you can talk all you want about, as Republicans frequently do, about making schools more secure by having more armed people there, and taking other kinds of measures. But if the armed people who are there, including police officers, don't do what they're supposed to do, they're not. It's not going to do any good.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that's the big thing with solutions, right? I mean, Robbie Sove wrote an article about this late yesterday or whatever, talking about the same thing, because my reaction is we've got these soft targets where it's the path of least resistance. These shooters are going to go. And in fact, the shooter in California, I can't remember which one it was, but he's the one that kept all the diaries and the journals. Dr. John Lott talked to me about this here a few years ago, where he said they actually went and read his journals, and the shooter talked specifically about choosing his targets, and he chose the school because it was a gun-free zone. It was a soft target. He knew he would face no resistance. And I think that's the question here. Hey, folks, you can't just ignore the fact that these are places where nobody is going to be armed. And so do we need to turn them all into TSA checkpoints? Do we need to? I don't think that that's the solution. And I definitely don't think more cops in the schools is the solution, because then you end up with cops dealing with situations that law enforcement really shouldn't be involved in. We've seen that. And we've even seen in the Parkland case, the school resource officer hid. He hid outside until the thing was pretty much over. So, you know.
That was a very clear case where the police failed in Parkland.
Exactly.
And this is looking like a similar sort of case where they delayed for way too long and did not take appropriate action. There were a lot more of them than there was just one of him, and there were a lot of them. And ultimately, he was killed by Border Patrol, but it was too late. So, so you have to ask, what the hell is going on there? I don't think I don't think the school should be turned into TSA checkpoints. I don't think, each one of these cases is horrifying, but the risk that, any given school is going to be targeted in this way is still very, very small.
Right.
So you can take reasonable steps, like you secure entrances, I don't understand how this guy got into the school, right? If the entrance is properly secured, they had him on a surveillance camera, and there was actually a guard who was a former police officer, I believe, who engaged him, encountered him. It's not clear exactly what he did. So how did this guy get into the school to begin with?
Right.
And then there's the question of, once he got in, why did they wait so long?
Right. Because
so I'm no
supposedly-
expert on police tactics, but it
Right.
looks like a pretty egregious failure to me.
Supposedly, that was one of the big lessons learned in Columbine, right? Because they had all that time to shoot everybody up, and in subsequent issues, they've usually gone in right away because they know that it can happen in just a handful of minutes, even if it's just onesies and twosies officers trying to go in and engage a shooter. But, yeah, I mean, what's going on here? The solution, and as you point out, this is a fraction of a percentage of all homicides take place in this way. They just happen to be the most visible, the most high visibility, the most heart-wrenching. And so that's why they get this kind of coverage. And it comes back to the politicians wanting to basically appear to do something, anything. They want to appear to actually be doing something. And that is really probably the most dangerous place to put a politician, where they just have to do something because they never consider the unintended consequences. We're going to get into that here in just a second. Hold on, Jacob. We're going to rejoin here in just a moment. Please like and share this video. Please like and follow the show page on Facebook. Please like and share, like and subscribe on YouTube as well. Here we go, The Michael Duke Show. All right, we're continuing now. Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine is our guest. We were just talking about some of the solutions here, which we'll get it back into here in just a bit. But before we went to break, I wanted to talk with Jacob about conflation because we're seeing this a lot, and it's become more prevalent in recent years. And he actually writes about it in his latest piece here from Reason Magazine, which I forgot to post up in the chat room. I'll do that right now. The piece is entitled, In Response to the Uvalde Massacre, Politicians Reiterate Their Demands for Irrelevant Gun Control. And we've talked about some of the irrelevant ideas that they put forward. But this conflation issue gets even deeper because now we're starting to see more and more how columnists and talking heads and politicians start to conflate this idea. First of all, they created the whole assault weapon moniker, and now they're talking about semi-automatic assault-style rifles. And then they start to try and use those terms interchangeably into semi-automatic firearms or semi-automatic weapons. And what most people don't realize is that big black rifles, while they're black and scary, they're just semi-automatic rifles, just like your uncle's M1 Garand that he's got sitting in the closet, or certain Remington hunting rifles that are semi-automatic, or that 89-year-old pistol that's laying in the drawer that's been there forever. It's a semi-automatic. I think it's intentional. They're trying to conflate those things with quote-unquote assault weapons or weapons of war or whatever they want to call it, Jacob.
Yes, I mean, I think in some cases people are genuinely confused. I mean, I wrote about the other day about Gail Collins, who used to be in charge of the editorial page of the New York Times, and now she writes a column, I think, every other week. And she's been writing about gun control for years and years, but she doesn't seem to have ever bothered to read any of this legislation or to understand really anything about the guns that she wants to ban. And so I think she just is really poorly informed and has never bothered to inform herself. I mean, in the same newspaper, you can see these errors being corrected. And the Times has run pieces where they acknowledge that, assault weapon bans target functionally unimportant features, that there are lots of semi-automatic guns, including rifles, that are not covered by these bans, some of which are specifically exempted, even though they're functionally identical, and so on. You do occasionally see pieces like that in the New York Times, right? But Gail Collins apparently hasn't read those articles, and she just continues to conflate these categories. And so she'll refer at one point to a specific gun that was used in a specific attack in Buffalo, in this case, and say, well, given the way that he modified it so that it could accept detachable magazines, and it also, judging from the photograph in his manifesto, had a pistol grip, that would be an assault weapon under New York law. And so, it's accurate as these things are defined legally to say that's an assault weapon. But then she goes on to talk about semi-automatic rifles, semi-automatic weapons, semi-automatic firearms, as if these categories are interchangeable. But those are much broader categories. And so if she really means that Congress needs to ban semi-automatic firearms, that would encompass, nearly all of the most popular handguns. I think there's one revolver on the list of the 15 most popular handguns, but it would cover all the other ones, and it would cover all of these long guns that don't qualify as assault weapons under any of these laws, and some of which are, under the federal ban, are specifically exempted.
Right.
Does it make sense that they're exempted? It doesn't make sense. No, because it's like functionally they're essentially the same, but that's the way these laws work, right? So she has maybe unintentionally zeroed in on something that is functionally significant. Whether a gun is semi-automatic or not is significant. Whether it automatically loads around after you pull the trigger, and so that you can fire repeatedly without manually reloading, that is significant, right? But if you say that's the thing we're going to target, then that means you're going to ban almost nearly all of the guns that are most popular, handguns that are most popular for self-defense, along with a host of rifles that no one has identified as assault weapons.
Right.
So I don't think she realizes that, because she seems to think that that they're targeting specific kinds. But then she uses much broader terminology. Right. Then there was a piece, I believe yesterday, by a former assistant attorney general that was in the Times that does this same bait and switch, where initially we're talking about this arbitrarily defined category of assault weapons, but then 6 or 7 times the author refers to either semi-automatic firearms or semi-automatic weapons. Again, sweeping much more broadly. In that case, though, judging from her rhetoric, I think it might have been on purpose, because she's complaining not just about these specific kinds of guns being available, but generally that Americans have easy access to guns, period.
Right.
Right. So, but what you get from that is, first of all, it's constitutionally impossible. These are precisely, these categories include precisely the kinds of guns that the Supreme Court has said are covered by the Second Amendment,
right,
that are commonly used for lawful purposes, and specifically handguns, which are the court called the quintessential self-defense weapon. So there's no way that would ever fly, under the Second Amendment. That's the first problem. The second problem is, Americans own maybe 450 million firearms. So even if you didn't have this constitutional barrier, what are you going to do about that?
Right, exactly.
Can you imagine even trying to confiscate all those weapons? So it's just a complete fantasy, this idea that you could possibly get rid of all of those guns,
right,
leaving people only with, revolvers and single shot weapons. Right? It just doesn't. So that has a different sort of problem in the assault weapon. The assault weapon ban makes these arbitrary distinctions that are really not important. But then if you talk about broader classes of weapons, you run into these constitutional issues and just this practical problem where there's just there's no way.
Right.
There's no way you could do that.
Right. And it ignores
politically or practically.
Right. And as you said, it ignores the constitutional issue of common use and lawful purpose. It moves all that. And again, going back to what I was talking about during the break, is that these types of shooting, while obviously the most highly visible, the most heartbreaking, the one that really pulls on the strings of the emotions of all Americans, really make up a fraction of a percent of all shootings, all homicides by firearm in the United States. More people are kicked, bludgeoned, and beaten to death with hands, fists, and feet than are killed with all rifles, assault rifles or not, all rifles.
Rifles were accounted for, I think it's 2019, about 5% of gun homicides were the type of firearm was specified, according to the FBI. And so only a subset of that would be what politicians describe as assault weapons.
Right.
And meanwhile, more than 9 out of 10 of the weapons are handguns.
Right.
And in fact, handguns are overwhelmingly used in mass shootings as well. The percentage isn't as high. It's like, I think it's 77% versus, over 90%. But still, when you talk about gun homicides, you were really primarily talking about handguns.
Right.
And so what you do about that, I don't know, because all of these weapons are out there already. People have a right to possess them. The criminals who are using them are not primarily obtaining their weapons, over the counter at a gun store. If you look at surveys of criminals, armed criminals, you find they're getting them from several different kinds of informal sources in general.
Right.
So you're getting them through private transfers. You're getting them from, black market dealers. You're getting them from friends and acquaintances and family. And none of those transactions would be touched by a new law that says, oh, you know what, you have to conduct a background check now. So it's completely unrealistic to suppose that a law like that would affect in any kind of significant way crime in general, let alone this very small subset, the mass shootings.
Right. Well, and you say unrealistic, and let's talk about the impact, because it's unrealistic to expect that this would have any impact. For one prime specific reason, in that the impact would be on law-abiding Americans. And, look, criminals by definition break the law. That's why we call them criminals, right? They've already made a decision. It's already illegal to carry a gun on school grounds. It's already illegal to shoot and kill people. It's already illegal to do all these things. And yet the politicians continue to say, if we just had one more law, that would fix it. That would be the solution. And yet we've got something like 20,000 different regulations regulating firearms on the books across all the statutes, and yet it still continues to happen. That law is going to do nothing but, as you pointed out earlier, make it harder for average citizens to obtain a firearm for home protection. It will disproportionately affect low-income and minorities, because they're the ones that are usually getting those kind of things to protect themselves. And now if you have to create hoops and tests and firing ranges and licensing fees and all this kind of stuff, you put that stuff out of reach for them. The only people affected are law-abiding citizens. Criminals just don't care.
Right. And so the only hope that you have of having an impact on violent crime in general, or on mass shootings in particular, through laws like these, is the extent to which they dry up the supply or just make it harder to obtain the weapons, obviously for everyone, but but specifically how that would affect the criminals that you're interested in, right? So that's sort of the premise of this whole thing. If you pass this law, yes, it's going to make things harder for everybody, but also it might make things harder for individual criminals. And the question is, how much harder, right?
Right.
If, for example, if there's a would-be mass shooter who has a disqualifying record, therefore he doesn't want to buy a gun from a gun dealer, and he wants to avoid the background check, and then Congress says, well, there has to be a background check for all sales. Does that mean that he therefore will undergo a background check? No, it probably does not. Judging from the massive noncompliance with that kind of law at the state level, it's not going to be a significant obstacle. I mean, look, especially for people who are determined, right? And so, somebody who is ready to commit mass murder is pretty motivated. Ordinary criminals who need guns for their careers are highly motivated to get them. And so even if you do have some kind of impact on the supply, those barriers are going to deter criminals in general and mass shooters in particular the least. Right. The least deterrent effect on the people that you're trying to deter.
Right. Let's finish up here with you, Jacob. I don't want to hold you too much longer. I appreciate you coming on with the potential solutions. And as you pointed out, the left solution, of course, is to ban all guns. We'll create a utopia. We'll do all this kind of stuff. But we know utopian type societies, even Australia and Norway, and they've all experienced the same kind of thing. The criminal element is going to do what the criminal element does. But on the right, their idea is essentially, from what I can tell, is to turn the schools into TSA checkpoints. Self-isolating metal detectors, and a squadron of police in the schools, and hardening the buildings, barricades, all this kind of stuff. And I think that there's a solution in there somewhere. I don't think that's the right answer. What is your take on how we prevent these kind of tragedies on soft targets like schools?
Well, the first thing that we should say is, even though these crimes are horrifying every time they happen, and they get a lot of attention, understandably, they are still quite rare in the context of all of the schools in the United States. There's a very tiny chance that any given school is going to be subject to an attack like this. So you have to keep that into perspective.
Right.
So then if you're asking, what kind of security measures make sense for a school, I'll just give you one example. My daughter goes to a junior high school, and they a couple of years ago, I think it was, they announced this new policy where they're basically going to be randomly searching students and their backpacks. And the justification for this was, we're worried about guns. And when you ask, well, had they actually had any problems like that? Not necessarily talking about mass shooters, but just like a kid who brings a gun to school and might get into a dispute that has lethal consequences. No, they never actually had a problem like that. And so why are you doing these random searches without probable cause and conditioning these students to, not question authority so that when they're adults, they will, willingly surrender their Fourth Amendment rights? There's no good answer. And ultimately, I don't think they even went through with that plan, even though they announced that this was the new policy. So stuff like that seems completely absurd to me. So when you're talking about rational responses, things, it makes sense to secure entrances. It makes sense to have armed people around who not only are armed, but are prepared to respond.
Right.
And as I mentioned earlier, in this case in Texas, it looks like there was an egregious failure by police because they were waiting outside for 40 minutes to an hour while these children were murdered. So the armed people were there, but they just didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
So loading schools up with, school resource officers or even having teachers be armed, it could make a difference, but it only makes a difference if people actually do what they're supposed to do.
Right. And I think, again, putting more police officers inside the school leads to further complications with police taking on duties and using law enforcement for things. I mean, there was an instance where they tried to arrest some girl for a dress code violation, or more students get restrained for minor infractions. There's all kinds of problems with that. I think the biggest...
Yes, and they turn disciplinary problems into criminal justice issues, and they bring in the police instead of handling it administratively, and that's a huge problem.
Right.
You have all of these kids who otherwise, would have been subject to some kind of inter-school discipline. They get arrested instead, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to think through the consequences. What may seem a logical response, more cops in schools, that'll do it. Has all kinds of downsides that you need to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best solution, as you pointed out, hardening the entrances, making sure that the doors are locked and secured, having the security cameras, doing those things. If you want to have one armed school security guard, great. I think the biggest thing you could do, though, is to allow those teachers that want to defend themselves or their students, that you allow them to be armed. I think that because then the shooter would have no idea how many people in the building are armed and ready to go. They are there in the situation. They don't have to steel themselves to dive into a building they are already there. It's happening in front of them, and I think that would go a long way. But the left doesn't want to hear anything about that.
Yes. I think I don't want to oversell that idea, but I think it's reasonable to say teachers who want to be armed, who are properly trained, who are responsible, that they should be allowed to do that. I don't think there's much risk that they will be, accidentally killing people, that sort of thing.
No, I don't think so.
And it could help. It could help. We don't know. This is a counterfactual speculation, but what if one or two teachers in that school had a gun? Might that have made a difference? It might have.
Yeah, it might have. And the only thing that we do know is that it was a person with a gun that stopped the guy with the gun. Hey, we got to go, folks. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Jacob Sullum, Reason Magazine. Yeah, my friend. I think that there's a lot to that. I think it's not just any one solution. I think, if you allowed teachers who wanted to be, and I'm not saying mandate, you don't arm people who don't want to be armed, but if you allowed people who wanted to be able to defend themselves the ability to do so, and maybe because they're teachers and they're going to be in the public, maybe they have to go through a little more training or something like that, which I think is every gun owner's responsibility anyway. But I think that would go a long way between the hardened entrances and, I'm not talking metal detectors. I'm just like lockdown schools, buzzer type systems with cameras and everything, and having teachers potentially armed in the school. That would go a long way to slowing that kind of stuff down.
Yes, I mean, it certainly seems more logical to me than a lot of the other proposals, but we don't want to present any of these things as a panacea.
No.
But there's sensible steps that can be taken, and we didn't even talk about red flag laws, but
right.
That's I think potentially helpful if they have proper due process protections, which they generally do not. But if they did, I'm not going to say it could never help. It might help. But what happens in case after case in both of these two recent shootings, there does not look like there were any clear signs that these people were going to commit crimes like these.
Right.
There was the one in the Buffalo shooter. He had the school project where they asked him about his post-graduation plans, and he mentioned murder-suicide. And like, oh my God, that's a red flag, right?
Right.
But then when they asked him about, he was reported to the state police. They asked him about it. He said it was a joke, right? Well, it could have been a joke, right? I mean, kids are stupid, and they say things like that, right? So, and they investigated. They did a psychiatric evaluation, and now everybody's saying, in retrospect, they obviously should have stopped him. They should have gotten a red flag order, and that would have stopped him from buying a gun, through a licensed dealer. But I'm not sure about that. I mean, there may be other facts that emerge, but I'm not sure the police failed in that case because it doesn't look, the people who knew him, the students who knew him and known him for years, none of them thought he posed a danger. They thought he was a bit weird, a bit introverted. But I didn't see anything in that case. And in this other case in Texas, they're saying there were no signs. There was no mental health issues. There was no violence. There was no criminal record as a juvenile. So, what are the red flags that we're going to use to issue these orders? And is there a danger, and there absolutely is, that people will show what you consider to be red flags, but actually turn out to be completely harmless? And that's going to be true in the vast majority of cases.
Right. Well, and we can point to case after case after case where there's been a failure, I mean, even of the laws that are on the books, I mean, or interactions or red flags. I mean, the Parkland shooter and the Pulse nightclub shooter, both of them had interactions with law enforcement. The one at Parkland had something like 20 different interactions with local law enforcement and with federal law enforcement.
Right.
I mean,
I think the Parkland case is a much clearer example, and they did pass a red flag law in Florida in response to that. That's a much clearer example of where there really were warning signs, where a rational person looking at this would say, this kid seems dangerous to me. But in other cases, you don't necessarily have evidence that strong.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to always be saying, well, because we know this guy became a mass killer, obviously somebody screwed up somewhere along the way, because it's not necessarily true.
Right, exactly. Well, like you said, there's no panacea, there's no magic, there's no magic wand that you can wave here to fix every problem, even if you turn them into TSA checkpoints, things still can go wrong. It's a bad world out there. And unfortunately, this kind of thing happens, and it's tragic. But the solution is to not basically penalize all of society for the actions of a very few. We have to figure out a way to deal with that. And I think the mental health issues are definitely one of the big factors in that as well. Final thoughts, Jacob Sullum here, Reason Magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I whenever I talk about these issues, I hear from people who say, well, what's your solution? Why are you being so negative? Why are you shooting down other people's proposals and you have no solution of your own? Because there is no easy answer, right? And there's certain marginal things that could make a difference. But when people propose policies and saying we have to pass this policy to show that we care and to show that we're doing something, I say, well, that's not a good enough reason. You need to actually weigh the costs and benefits of that policy. That's all I'm asking for.
Right.
I think that's a reasonable request, is that we actually talk about what this policy would actually do, what is the downsides might be, and whether it actually promises to be effective.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Jacob Sullum, Reason Magazine. You can find him at reason.com. Thanks, my friend, for coming on. I really appreciate that last minute that you bailed me out there. I appreciate it.
Sure. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on board. Jacob Sullum. Again, reason.com. If you want to read his works, his piece, this is his latest piece that we were just talking about here this morning here on the program. All right, we're coming back into it. We're 30 seconds out right now, getting ready to rejoin and talk with you. We're going to talk about solutions. We're going to talk about the potential solutions that Jacob and I were just discussing, and we'll see what you guys have to say. We'll open up the phone lines as well to talk about that at 433-3150. So I guess I'll throw that up there right now. We'll get it all ready if you want to be part of it. Now's the time to do it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing here. One final segment, and I'm opening the phone lines up one more time for Q&A, discussions, and more. So what are the solutions to this? Now, the bottom line is that there's no perfect solution to any of this. I can tell you right now the answer of penalizing 99.99% of all Americans, law-abiding gun owners out there, for the actions of madmen is not the solution. There is no legislating evil or insanity. There's no way to legislate it. Evil is going to do what evil's going to do. When somebody's become a criminal and decided to break with societal norms and they've decided to, rape, rob, steal, kill, whatever, there's no legislating that. The same thing with insanity, only worse, because you can't even put you can't wrap your brain around what somebody like that does. That's the answer from the left, right? Is all these gun laws, none of which would really have made a hill's beans worth of difference for this incident. None of that would have effectively changed any of those things. And then the right solution of, well, we need to put, a whole platoon of armed police officers in the schools. And again, that comes with its own unintended consequences of turning every minor disciplinary action into a criminal justice issue. And that's not just speculation. That's happened over and over and over again. You can look. Robbie Sove over at Reason Magazine has written about this. All these things that have happened where they basically, they've arrested children for violating dress code that they have. There's been a fourfold increase in the state of Florida, for example, after doubling the number of police officers in school, a fourfold increase in incidents of students being physically restrained by the police, fights between students and sexting investigations, and even problems on the playground have become the purview of the criminal justice system. So that's a problem in and of itself. And on top of that, we've seen also that it's not the perfect solution because we saw what happened at Parkland, where that school resource officer basically went and hid when the shooting starts and was later cleared when he was charged with it because the courts had acknowledged, as they have in the past, that he did not have a duty to defend the children. That's not a duty. That's gone on over and over and over again. Creating, metal detectors at every door with gates that slam shut if something goes, if something dings in your pocket or what, to me, the best solution is if you want to have an armed guard or two, have an armed guard or two. I don't know as they need to be police officers. I think an armed guard or two would not be bad. Hardening the entrances, locking them down, securing the schools and entrances and exits, and having the buzzer, got to buzz them in kind of thing with the video cameras and everything else. And then the big thing is allowing those teachers who want to, and I want to stress that, want to be armed. Those teachers that want to be able to protect themselves and others. I mean, how many tragic stories do we have to hear about teachers throwing themselves in front of these gunmen to protect their children, getting gunned down with nothing more than, their loving attitude towards their children. That's all they have to defend themselves. What if there were a handful of teachers in the school who had decided to arm themselves and got the training, needed to face active shooters? And do that? They're there in the situation. They're not like the Parkland SRO who's, outside the building hiding. They are there in it. They don't have to be the police who wait outside 40 minutes for the thing to be over. They are already in the middle of it. They have the ability to do it. And what kind of factor would that give to these criminals to understand that they just don't know who in that building may be armed. That they could turn around any corner and face somebody who's armed and have that be. There have been instances, it was one of the California shooters, and I don't remember which one, but he kept journals about his whole thing. And Dr. John Lott and I talked about this, and he wrote in his journal how he chose his target. He chose a target specifically that did not have any guns. It was a gun-free zone. He wanted that soft target. But what if, 10% of the teachers have been armed? If you've got 40 or 50 teachers in a school, now you've got something to deal with that gives uncertainty. That helps slow things down. But again, no solution is perfect. Let's go back to the phones and see what you have to say. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Morning, Michael, Greg, and Homer.
Hello, Greg. How's it going, my friend?
My God, it's a beautiful day down here. Sun's shining, no wind. I'm liking it.
I'm jealous, my friend. I'm totally jealous.
Well, hopefully you get to come down and play this weekend. That'd be fun.
Yeah, unfortunately I got 4 days of honeydew to get the rest of my summer clear. So we'll do what we need to do.
Oh, darn it. Okay.
What's on your mind today, my friend?
Hey, talking about making schools better. The NRA had a really good program, and I'm unsure if it's still active, but it was called National School Shield, and they sent trained people in that knew security. They would do an analysis of the school and give the suggestions on a written report to the school board or the principal or whatever. And then the school could apply for grants through the NRA Foundation to help fund upgrades to make the school more secure. And a lot of it was, doors that got left open or in the back of the building, there'd be a door that, was always open.
Right.
And people knew that. So if it's suddenly locked, they can't make unobserved access into the building. But they did all these things, and I talked to a couple schools about it, and they weren't interested. They didn't want to spend any money. Yet our education system is so funded.
Right. It's all about the children, right? It's about the children.
I say that with some sarcasm. I hope you caught that.
Yeah, no. No, it's tragic. And nothing bothers me more than people who say, but you can't put guns with teachers' pockets because anything is going to stop these teachers from doing what they would do if they decided to do bad things, they could. That's the thing. I mean, all of a sudden you're saying because you gave them a gun or allowed them to bring their own gun, that somehow that's going to make it more dangerous. Well, I just can't imagine my child in the room with a gun. Well, you're really happy when the police officer with a gun shows up. Is that the same thing? I mean, the whole thing is so astonishing to me, Greg, that we can't even talk about that. It blows my mind. My friend, it's good to hear from you. I'm sorry I'm up against it. I got to go. I got 2 more lines on hold, but we're just not going to be able to get to them on the air here. Folks, we're out of time. I'm off tomorrow and Monday for the weekend. We will see you back on Tuesday here. Thank you for being part of it. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is on Tuesday. I'm done. I'm already mentally checked out. Unfortunately, I got a full day of work ahead of me, but that's how it goes, I guess. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Hug those kids. Love them. And you know what? Love one another. Be kind. Live well. The Michael Duke Show. All right. I got one more call on hold that held on here. Let me take that call just to see who it is. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is Melissa in Fairbanks.
Hey, Melissa. What's on your mind?
So I started out homeschooling our kids, then thought I was doing it wrong because I put my kids in classes part-time, and the teachers and the principal told me I was doing it wrong, so I listened to them and put my kids in public school for a year. And that was the year that Sandy Hook happened, and I had kids that same age as those kids who died. And I went into the school, and I told the principal, you can't defend my children, and she was horrified by what I said. I withdrew with the kids, and I took them back home to homeschool, and I enrolled them in 22 classes.
In 22
and
in 22
still,
in 2022 classes, or I'm sorry.
No, like firearms classes.
Oh, in training, firearms training. 22 rifles. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep, and we're still homeschooling to this day, and all told, my oldest is 23, so we've been homeschooling since he was born, I guess you could say. And my 14-year-old at the age of 7 was the most accurate shooter in her class.
You got to love it. You got to love it. No, and I agree. I mean, that's the thing. They can't guarantee your child's safety. There's no guarantees in this world, You can do everything you can do. There's no guarantees in this world, but that's for it.
Yeah. Even if they lock all of the access doors except the front door, they can't keep people out, because if someone wants in, they're going to find a way to get in. Everybody's got cell phones. You call your cousin or your nephew or your whoever that's in school and say, hey, I'm going to come visit, open the door. So they do. Right. And you get in that back door. So.
Right. Well, I mean, and there's reports on this Uvalde thing that there's been several reports that he crashed his car into the building. Now, they're not saying where or how, but what if he crashed him through the front doors? I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but, if the school was locked down, as they say that most of them are down there, locked down with video cameras, what if he just drove his truck or his car into the front door and was able to walk through the glass there and get in? I mean, again, criminals are going to break the law. And the laws are only to keep society polite, right?
Yep. Or you could have a friend who drives a vehicle through the back door, and everybody runs back there, and he walks in the front door.
Yeah, you have no idea. It's and of course we could speculate a million different ways, but I mean, just we have to have a reasonable conversation about this. And unfortunately, anytime you start talking about, putting more armed security or police in schools or allowing teachers to be armed or anything else like that, they're like, I don't want my children to live in that kind of world. Well, I'm sorry. That's the world. And whether it's a shopping mall or a movie theater or a Halloween parade where a guy drives a truck into kills a bunch of people with a truck, that's the world we live in. I would love to live in your utopian society.
We've always lived in a world from the beginning of time where you have to defend yourself.
Yep.
And, maybe in some societies it's been defending yourself from mean words. Today's society is, if it's not weapons, guns, it's knives or it's vehicles.
Right.
You always just have to have your eyes open, and you always have to know where the exit is. And you always just have to be prepared that somebody's going to be stupid. And so we try to teach our kids that. And every couple of years, sign them up for safety classes or target practice classes and that kind of thing. And it's mentally exhausting, maybe, but you have to be aware of your surroundings. And all of them are in martial arts, and our instructor, our master, taught them that. They said, you always look. You don't look at the ground or your phone when you're walking. Look around.
Right.
Is there somebody sitting in a vehicle? Is there somebody behind a vehicle? Look around you.
Yeah,
because you can't trust people.
Situational awareness is we could do a whole show on situational awareness, Melissa, that's for sure. Hey, I appreciate you calling in. Thanks for being part of it today. I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend. Thanks for coming in. All right, folks, I mean, at this time, I'm gonna fly. Mandatory parent in school. I got to tell you, all this is reason number 1262 why I homeschooled my kids. All of these reasons that we just talked about, from the actual quality of the education to the ability to defend, to the to keeping them safe, all of those reasons, and then some. All right, my friends, we're gonna go. Thank you for coming in. Thanks for being part of it. I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Don't forget to go out to YouTube and subscribe to my channel, will you? The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.